Don't miss out on the last few weeks of football action with Prize Picks, the best place to win cash while watching the playoffs. The app is simple. Pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your cash. Download the Prize Picks Daily Fantasy Sports app today and use code FIELD and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code FIELD on Prize Picks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Prize Picks. Run your game. Must be present in certain states. Visit prizepicks.com for restrictions and details.
When you need mealtime inspiration, it's worth shopping Kroger for thousands of appetizing ingredients that inspire countless mouth-watering meals. And no matter what tasty choice you make, you'll enjoy our everyday low prices. Plus, extra ways to save, like digital coupons worth over $600 each week and up to $1 off per gallon at the pump with points. So you can get big flavors and big savings. Kroger, fresh for everyone. Fuel restrictions apply.
Hey guys, welcome to episode 6 of Flixwatcher podcast. I'm Kobe.
And I'm Helen.
So in this episode, we are talking about Beasts of No Nation, the Netflix original featuring Idris Elba. And on the show, we have Ben and John from Top Film Tip and from Future Music. And we look forward to playing the show to you.
Come find us on Twitter, tweet to us, agree with us, disagree. We're at FlixWatcherPod. The website flixwatcher.tv has full listings of each episode, and subscribe and review us on iTunes. All films featured in the podcast were available to stream on Netflix UK at the time of recording, and please be aware there will be spoilers and some language that may offend. Welcome to this edition of Flixwatcher. And today we are joined by Ben and John. If you'd like to introduce yourselves. Hi, Ben.
Hi, Helen. Hi, Kobe.
Hi.
I'm Ben. I run at Top Film Tip on Twitter, where I put out kind of snappy, short little synopsis of the best films on TV each day. So, for instance, Beasts of No Nation, as we'll be discussing today, would be Orphaned African boy is swallowed into the quagmire of Idris Elba's monstrous child army in crushing spellbinder. Beasts of No Nation.
That's a pretty good description for 140 characters.
Yeah, well
Including
done.
the
It's very
title.
concise.
And who are you?
So John Lonnie here, big film fan. Great to be involved in the show. And I run a fortnightly show on Future Music FM, so more the music side than the film side. But recent episodes included a sci-fi soundtrack special, for example.
Oh, lovely.
I want to check that out now.
We are here today to discuss Beasts of No Nation, the Netflix original film. It's your choice, Ben. So just want to give us a brief synopsis of the film, please.
So this is a pretty hard-hitting film. It follows the story of a young African boy. He's probably about 12 or 13 years old. He has a happy, normal sort of life for a child in a
war-torn country.
Well, he's surrounded by a war-torn area, and it's never really affected him before. So we'll come to that point a bit later on, how that emotes with the audience. But he certainly he has a nice, happy sort of childhood. He plays, he has fun, and one day the war comes to him, and he suffers a pretty significant series of tragedies in a very short period, and ends up being forcibly enlisted into a child army,
Helmed by
Idris Elba,
Yeah.
Big Driss, who really does play against type, and he's a very brave role.
for Idris.
For Idris, certainly we'll come to that, I'm sure. And it follows his story from start to finish, and it really doesn't pull any punches.
Is that fair to say, John?
I think so, yeah. It's a tough watch, I think, but really, really rewarding. I think probably one of the most interesting films I've watched in recent times.
Well, there's a lot of violence in it. I think I've been used to a lot of more cartoon violence, even though, looking back at stuff that Quentin Tarantino does with Kill Bill, for example, there's a lot of blood going on there, but it's all in the name of, it's all done with a kind of wry smile on your face, but this is horrible. It's horrible. There's people getting shot. There's no kind of comeback from it at all. They just drop dead. They just drop straight on the floor, and it's real, and it's visceral, and it's horrible. Sinew everywhere.
One of the points that often gets levelled at Tarantino's films is how his films are so horrendously violent. But when you actually compare them to other films, often aimed at a younger audience, Home Alone's a good example, they sanitize it and make it seem quite normal. You watch a Bond film, someone gets shot, they drop dead, there's no blood. You watch something like this, you watch something like Tarantino, and even in Tarantino's sort of fantastic environment that he creates, and certainly in films like this, you really see the aftermath and the weight of the violence. And I think that's what leaves the shock in the experience, is seeing, you know, what real violence is like. And it isn't a horror film, it isn't a fantasy, it is just utterly horrendous.
Yeah, I think part also, when we all watched it, we sort of had a little chat about it before, just how shocked we were sort of on many levels, that obviously with the violence as well, but also I think how quickly someone's childhood is taken away as well. So it's not just that kind of violence, but the fact that someone's taken so quickly from being so innocent and having a childhood, which is played out really beautifully in one of the opening scenes, is so quickly turned into a very troubled young person in you know, it's not really given a time scale, but, you know, it's a matter of weeks that he's turned into basically a young killer, forced into it, and all his childhood's completely disappeared just like that.
I'd agree entirely, Helen. The first thing about this film that drew me in so strongly was that, you know, I'm a middle-class white guy in my 30s who lives in London. I immediately felt a kinship and an affection for this young boy. It could be anyone. That's correct. Yeah. He, whilst he is, you know, an African boy in an unnamed country that's definitely not Sierra Leone, he could be anyone. He could be your little brother. He could have been you. He could be your child. What happens to him becomes very tangible, because it's very easy to put yourself in his place, or someone you know in his place.
I think one thing I thought, because overall talking about, you know, the violence, and you kind of, certain scenes stick with you quite strongly, but related to that in a way is how the story draws you in, and it's beautifully shot, and all the characters are quite relatable and quite human, and even the Idris Elba's character and everything else, they're all quite rounded characters with their own human emotions and stories and everything else. So even amidst all the violence, everything that's going on, you get drawn into the characters quite quickly, I think, and you care about some of them much more than others, perhaps, in terms of what happens to them, in terms of, you know, whether or not it's fair or not. But it's. I
mean, right at the start, I think what you're talking about, how it draws you in and how quickly that flips. Because at the start, you see Agu playing with his friends. Imagination TV, and trying to get
one of my favourite scenes I've seen in a very, very long time.
Yeah,
it's brilliant.
And so just carrying around this empty like 80s TV shell, and trying to play a theatre kind of scene for various different people, trying to get them to extract money from them, money and food. You just see the mates hanging around and having a laugh with each other. Then you see Agu playing with his older brother. He's like pissing on his older brother whilst he's having a shower.
That's hilarious.
And they just have all that kind of setting the family scene, which is all really cool. And then suddenly one day, the day before they hear the army's going to come in and everything's going to go tits up, basically. Within the space of 5 minutes, he's gone from a very happy kind of situation, even though there's undertones of war going on because they're surrounded by soldiers who are kind of protecting them in some way, to suddenly all the people I know, the male people I know, are in a lineup with guns pointed at them, and Agu's the only one to come out. And that's a horrible switch and change in events.
And perhaps, as Helen mentioned earlier, the most hard-hitting part of that is he doesn't have the kind of emotional maturity to deal with the rug of his entire life being pulled out from under him.
Well, I mean, he's too young to fully comprehend what's happened.
I mean, it would be immensely traumatic for anybody, but at that age, all the certainty, everything he's ever known is completely destroyed in a way that it was incomprehensible to him.
One thing that was interesting for me was I actually watched Blood Diamond again fairly recently.
Okay, I've never seen that.
And it's because there's a very strong story in that where it's a child soldier. It's similar subject matter to some extent, but they're clearly the focus in this is the child and what happens throughout. That's the story. Whereas in Blood Diamond, it very much follows the sort of mix of characters. But it's also how this film, I think, challenges some of the stereotypes much more to some extent. It's not as simple as boy snatched by evil soldiers and turned into a killer, because in fact it's the government forces that I think kill his father. they accuse him of being rebels and everything else, and so he runs away and then finds these guys. So it's not a clear cut story that, I think in Blood Diamond, for example, the rebels come along and they steal their children
and turn them into the soldiers.
Whereas this, in fact, he runs away, and the government is responsible for killing his father. So it's a slightly more challenging kind of conversation. It's like becoming radicalized, and Idris Elba's character isn't a wholly evil person per se. He does some terrible things, and as you say, it's not his normal kind of role he plays. But at the same time, there's even times you feel sorry for him because he's not necessarily as big a guy as he thought he was, and there's a pecking order for him too, and he's sort of doing the best he can, and to some extent he does feel compassion for the people under his care, even though he's making them do terrible things. And it's what draws you in. It's really interesting. They're kind of the, who's good, who's bad, are they just a product of their environment, all in a really, really beautifully shot film, I think, which makes it a tough watch, but makes it so rewarding to watch.
Well, it's a great looking film, isn't it? And something that is, let's talk about that now, because this is a made for Netflix film, but there was a cinematic release, as a short cinematic release to make it eligible for award seasons. Do you think would you like to see this on a cinema? Or was it good enough for you watching it, this magnificent kind of vista with tainted with blood on a smaller screen? I'm
certainly pleased that I watched it in any medium, although it would have been very interesting to watch it on a big screen. It's my understanding that they did have an agreement with various distributors. I think the 4 largest distributors in the US, but when they realised that Netflix were going to release it virtually simultaneously, and they weren't going to have what is generally an industry standard sort of monopoly for a period of months on the film, I think 3 of the 4 pulled out last minute, and so it only had a very small cinematic release for that reason, which obviously dented how much it took at the box office and how many people saw it on the cinema. The other thing to note is it's not just a Netflix original film, it's the first Netflix original film. Okay. So it's the first one that they really invested in doing an original film content. And I think that probably surprised everyone with the quality, because up to that point, I guess people just thought made for TV film. And then they went from there to Adam Sandler.
Yeah, I'm beginning to question the quality of Netflix originals after this.
Well, maybe someone sort of thought, I've done Beasts of No Nation, I may as well just retire now, because it's like the sort of this Saving Private Ryan type intensity at times, and with a very different storyline. I can imagine if it was on a cinema, you'd probably be even more shell shocked.
Would have been interesting to see it at the cinema. I remember going to see Hotel Rwanda at the cinema when that came out, and sort of being in a cinema with lots of very white middle class people who were, oh my God, this is awful, this is such a terrible thing. And it was kind of a bit like, this happened, and we all kind of sat there and we watched it on the news and we all knew it was happening, and you're kind of sitting there now, you're getting upset because there's kind of a film version, and it would have been kind of interesting to sort of observe different people's reactions, because obviously this is a fictional film, and it's based on a novel, but it's a non-specific West African country. But from what we know, from what we have seen, that is true, that what's portrayed there did happen, is happening. We're kind of in this position where we're sort of watching it, but we're talking about it, and it is terrible, but
it's life, and it's life for a lot of people.
It is, yeah. And it is very fine line, because we're obviously watching this film which we appreciate extremely highly for its technical things, for how well it portrays its characters and how very real it is, but also it is kind of a form of entertainment as well, so you do have that kind of strange conflict while you're watching it. It's a very uncomfortable thing to sort of be doing with your kind of Sunday afternoon off.
The last film I saw at the cinema that kind of took a proper big hit at me was 12 Years a Slave.
Wow.
And that was, at the end, there were just people just couldn't move at the end of the film. So I hadn't seen things like Saving Private Ryan at the cinema. I saw them on TV afterwards. So it would be interesting to see how that would have compared to something like 12 Years a Slave on a big screen.
I think that's an interesting parallel. I think both films are strikingly beautiful and
strikingly vicious.
Yeah, exactly. And again, as you say, Helen, the technical work in this film is astonishingly well made. I think they did it in 35 days. They used people who weren't actors. They used people who had been child soldiers. Indeed, I think the aptly named tripod, who goes into battle naked, insisted on doing so because that's what he did when he was a child soldier. So the people portraying the things that happen in these films, lived through them themselves to one extent or another. Back to the original point, was I happy watching it on a small screen? It reminded me a lot of one of my other favourite films, Apocalypse Now. And I think for me, one of the best ways to watch Apocalypse Now is late at night on a really hot summer's night. And you feel the sweltering
so
heat.
you can feel like you're in Vietnam.
and it's engaging and it pulls you in. And it did feel like that watching it late at night on a hot evening, and it's immersive. And I think that it's a film that has a very cinematic feel to it and would obviously benefit from being seen on a big screen. But at the same time, I think it somehow makes it more affecting and more personal to watch it in your lounge.
One of the things I want to talk about is Idris Elba. Of course, he's the main kind of character here, but we can't take anything away from Agu and I guess his best mate in this film, Strika, who take us around this world. Agu from the outside coming into it, and Strika, who's quite a nice character touch that he doesn't speak at all during the film. He's seen all these atrocities, and was it ever explained why he didn't speak? Or
I just assumed he'd just been so traumatized he wasn't able to communicate.
Yeah, but Idris Elba, what do you think of him in this role? He's typically a nice guy, more light-hearted from Stringer Bell through to...
Yeah, he usually plays a good guy. What's the TV series? Luther, yeah. It's a brave role to take. Not many actors would choose a role where they portray a paedophile, a war criminal, someone who is just reprehensible, but at the same time tries to bring some measure of relatability to it. And I think they say the best bad guys think they're the good guys, and in this case Idris Elba's character certainly thinks he's fighting a good fight, even if he isn't.
Yeah, and I think, as you say, the point is obviously with, giving the plot away, the point where in fact, yes, he ends up molesting the main character and stuff, which is done when it makes that turn, you think, oh, that's even worse. Ridiculous.
Yeah.
You've seen some terrible things, and you think actually, well, at least he's kind of looking out for the kids, and then actually then he realizes he's abusing them, but still, it's just that's under this kind of special relationship. It's really a horrible kind of dynamic that interplays, and yet still sees these people as this kind of flock that he's looking after, and then when he goes and meets the high command and stuff like that, he's no longer this kind of top dog, the biggest boy in school kind of thing. He's actually maybe not as well educated as some of the other, the government, the rebel government kind of people, and he feels a bit sidelined and stuff like that, and actually then you kind of feel sorry for him a bit there, and shows some vulnerability, for example, and then later on the kind of what happens to him, and
that may well actually be the thing that precipitates his fall from power over his flock, in that they see that he's perhaps not as strong and not as big a man as he's made himself out to be.
I think certainly take a turn for the worse after that for everyone, I think. But
it's an amazing performance.
Yeah,
it's really, really strong performance from him. Kind of little for me was Forrest Whitaker, of course, as Idi Amin in The Last King of Scotland, which
true.
he won an Oscar for, I believe, didn't he?
I don't know, actually.
So yeah, it's kind of a similar sort of performance there, but sort of in a comparison, Idris Elba is much better than that, in that he does make someone who could easily have become kind of a caricature of a kind of warlord into someone who is ultimately human. So it's such a performance, and hopefully he will kind of be remembered for this performance and be given a lot more scope in future roles, because obviously he's got the
he's got a big
there.
range.
Yeah,
and this is one of the key proponents behind the Oscar So White kind of campaign, was that Idris Elba wasn't nominated for this role. I mean, what are your thoughts on that generally? Generally Oscar So White, and do you think he should have been a nominee for the Oscars this year in 2016?
I'm not sure if there are any specific rules for applying to be nominated for the Oscars, if the film has to have a certain release or a certain box office.
Well, because when you're talking about its release into the cinemas, I thought just to be awards eligible, they had to be shown somewhere in America for 2 days or something arbitrary like that to then be eligible for awards nomination. So that's what I thought the original reason for them having a very short release was, but then you've highlighted otherwise. But still, that gives them some kind of eligibility. But the kind of fact still stands that they weren't nominated.
It's been out for a year now. I checked before, so it's been available on Netflix for a year. So its eligibility may have fallen outside for this year, but is an interesting kind of point. Obviously, there was a lot of talk last year. The lack of diversity across the board really is a problem for the Oscars, and not something that can probably be resolved with throwing in a few nominations here and there. It's a kind of a deeper seated thing within sort of the Academy, and I don't know how it sort of rewards filmmakers and those in the profession.
I think it possibly goes a little bit deeper, that it's not. It may well be that people aren't considering these roles for nominations, and also I think it probably reflects that there aren't as many roles for non-white actors. How many American films can you think of that had an Asian actor in the lead role?
This is one comment I was saying to my friends, is that black actors tend to get a better slice of the pie than Southeast Asian and Indian people of Indian origin and stuff like that. Even Latin-based actors. So I think there's a whole there's a fair few things. A lot of the angle was based out things like Idris Elba should have been nominated. As a result of this year's kind of Oscar So White hashtag that was going around, they've pulled in a lot of new people into the Oscar voting pool, including people who, like chap who played Finn in Star Wars, for example. And so younger people, more diversity from a sex point of view, and more kind of racial diversity, in a bid to kind of assuage that there's accusations of upper middle class white men in America who are rich being the only people who can vote for the Oscars. Do you think that will help solve these concerns or rectify the positioning, or is it something that needs to be rectified?
It certainly needs attention. I think it sounds like it's a good step. I think the next good step would be if there were more interesting roles for people
of all diversities,
of all backgrounds.
Yeah.
Not just somebody's. They have the Rab, Russian Arab bad guy, or the criminal, or somebody's friend, or the sidekick. It would be nice to have other actors. But we're phase 3 of Marvel.
Yeah.
For the first time, Captain America, Civil War's the first black superhero.
Well, what about War Machine?
You said superhero.
Yeah.
Is Rhodesy not? Is he not a
Silence
superhero?
for War.
He's a sidekick. Okay, all right. So
That's a whole other podcast.
Are you going to go and see a film about War Machine, or are you going to go and see a film about Black Panther?
Oh, I'll see a film about Black Panther, but I don't know. War Machine's always been a weird one for me because he's got Iron Man's first suit, hasn't he? So he's maybe not as good, but he's still better than most human beings at being a superhero. So I don't understand why he's not.
He's a government man he's a government man who tells his password to Tony Stark in front of terrorists.
So therefore, he shouldn't be.
No, he's just a guy with a suit. He's not. He doesn't invent. He doesn't do anything useful. He just causes emotional stress to his friends getting injured. This is spoilers for a whole other film.
I'm going to bring it right back round to B. So interestingly...
Smooth.
Yeah. It was directed by the director of The True Detective, which was also...
I was surprised.
Yeah.
You were surprised?
In retrospect, when I put the two things together in my mind, it made a lot of sense, but I hadn't realised. And that first series of True Detective was astonishing, and I think he's obviously... he obviously has a very distinct style. He hits the emotional punch, but he doesn't lose any of the technical acumen.
Was it him that did that film Sin Nombre?
I believe so.
Yeah, which is also an ace film that not enough people, I think, saw.
I haven't seen it.
Yeah, well,
puts his hand up. Yeah.
Well, no worries. I don't think
on the list.
Yeah, I've seen it. It was great. So it shows he's got some chops and he's got some heavyweight edge to him, and he's an insightful and daring director.
Interesting. He also did Jane Eyre with Fassbender.
Oh, did he?
Yeah.
Ah.
So it would be also interesting to see what he kind of comes up with next, and whether it is something that is TV based or is it kind of Netflix along the line, because it seems to be his strengths are sort of Netflixy or made for TV kind of areas.
It sounded like quite a somber, serious discussion that we've been having about this film. It's a heavy hitter.
Yeah.
it's not pleasant at times. Certainly, it's uncomfortable.
Are there any particular scenes that, because we are doing spoilers, are there any particular scenes that stick out in your mind, stick out in your craw as fuck?
Many, but what my point, I didn't want to dwell on that, and what I was going to say is that whilst it is a real gut punch of a film, it's truly astonishing, and it does have its hope. It's sort of a string of hope throughout, and as John said earlier, it's immensely rewarding. So I just wanted to sort of finish on a positive about the film rather than talking about it in a just the heavier elements and the more somber elements of the film.
I think generally everyone is positive about it.
Yeah, I mean it's kind of not a Friday night. Get some beers in, get the snacks on, invite the lads around to film night. Whoa, it's something that you're probably going to end up watching on your own. Don't watch it when you're feeling a little bit tender or a bit sad. But,
yeah, I think but as Ben said, I think it's quite a reflective film and it's quite a personal experience, and you watch it and you kind of enjoy it. I think in a way, the small screen, you sit there and you watch it all, and you kind of, it really draws you in the whole way through. I think it's quite. I think it'd be interesting to see if it's a very different experience of watching it in a cinema full of other people. It might, I don't know, be more emotional, or in fact you'd lose something else. I don't know. It'd be interesting. But it's great. Everyone should watch it. If you haven't seen it already, go and watch it. I suppose we're going to talk about ratings.
Yeah. This takes us into our first rating, the recommendability score, out of 5. So this is kind of how easy would it be for you to recommend, and how many people would you recommend it to?
Yes.
Flex your business with an American Express Business Gold Card. You'll earn 4 times membership rewards points on your top 2 eligible spending categories, like transit and electronics, each month, on up to $150K in combined purchases per year. Plus, you can now earn 3 times membership rewards points on flights and prepaid hotels booked on AmexTravel.com. Terms and points cap apply. Learn more at americanexpress.com/business-gold. Amex Business Gold, built for business by American Express.
So we do it as the top mark is 5 and the lowest mark is
a 0.
Is a 0. You can give a 0 if you feel the need to.
So Ben, as you chose this film,
recommendability, 5 stars.
5 stars. Would you recommend to everyone though? Would there be some kind of caveat to that?
Well, not like anyone under the age of about 13.
Would you recommend it to anyone who should legally watch this?
I tend to find recommending films to people when I know they won't like it makes them not listen to my recommendation the next time I recommend a film. So I'd only recommend this film to people on the basis that I thought they were the sort of person who would have a deeply moving experience, as John described, and be kind of tuned in to the subject matter of the film. But to those people who would be receptive to it, 5 stars.
And John?
I mean, 5 out of 5 in terms of recommendability. It's probably one of the best films I've watched in recent times, easily, to some extent. And I think, as long as you're not going to be totally squeamish about some graphic content, and as long as you're not going to be totally uncomfortable with some of the pretty strong themes around, child soldiers and things like that, then you should definitely watch it. If nothing else, because it's violent, it's brutal, some horrible things. It's beautifully shot. The characters are so believable, and you kind of empathise with them all, that it helps you watch it from start to finish. I think even the tough scenes are harder to watch, easier to watch, because you want to find out what happens to them.
It's compelling.
Very.
5.
5?
If you haven't seen this and you have the vaguest interest in cinema, then you need to see this, really. Exactly what everyone has said. I haven't seen a film like this in a long, long time. It's intelligent. It's incredible to watch. The cinematography is beautiful. The acting in it is amazing. There is no reason, if you haven't seen this and it's still obviously on Netflix, then you should watch it.
I'm going to give it a 5, but with a caveat that it's not going to be for everyone. And I can think of a lot of people who like films but kind of just would not deal well with it, and it's a hard hitter. So it's not something that you wouldn't just. It's not like a blockbuster. You say this is amazing, go and watch it. You'll enjoy it. It's going to scare people, basically.
It has a hopeful thread throughout, but it's not a pleasant watch.
Repeat viewing score, Ben.
This is a film, actually, I would like to come back to and reflect on every couple of years. I've watched it twice already. You know, I found it very rewarding the second time round, and I think it is a film I would come back to. It wouldn't be something I'd want to watch.
You wouldn't watch it every week.
Yeah, I wouldn't watch it frequently. But it is a film I could see myself 50 years from now watching.
So what kind of score would you give it?
I think I'd have it as a 4 then, on that basis that it's something I would want to watch again, but it's not something I would want to watch frequently.
I don't know, 2.5. It's not really. I'll say 2. I think, but not because it's not a great film. I think partly because it's not the kind of Friday night popcorn beers film. We don't think, oh, and I'll put on Beast of No Nation again, watch that for a laugh with with people around here. You just don't do that. And I think, and it is good. I think I would watch it again. I haven't watched it again all the way through, and I think I suddenly would. And I probably would watch it more than once again, but how many more times after that, I don't know. And I think, unlike even some films such as Saving Private Ryan, which are pretty violent and brutal, that's much more of an action film. I think, you know, you can watch the action scenes as much more of a straightforward war film, even pretty tense and pretty graphic in the way it's shot. But you might think, oh, that's a really good scene. I want to kind of watch that again. I don't think there's any scenes in this where I think like that, unless it's, you know, the Imagination TV, just for a bit of, you know, dip in 5 minutes. On the whole, there's no bits you kind of want to just dip into again because you thought they were really good. Yeah. Because it's horrific. So
that has actually given me food for thought, and I want to change my score to a 3 now.
Yes.
on the basis that I was considering Apocalypse Now, which is a heavy-hitting, hard film, but it's a film I could watch again and again and again and again. And I could get the guys around with beers and snacks and enjoy that film. And it really does have something about it that makes it very enjoyable, even though
there's lots of funny bits in it, and there's lots of quotable lines, and there's lots of things going on in there.
This film is something I would want to rewatch, but it is not something I would want to sit down and watch regularly in the same way I would other heavy-hitting films.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a Schindler's List, isn't it? So once you've seen it, you know, I've only seen it the once. I probably would watch it again, but not for a while. Whether I'd need to watch it again after that, probably not. It's quite an experience to watch it. Obviously, we're talking about it after we've, you know, it's been a while since we've seen it. But had we have just all come out of a screening of it and been together, then this would have been a very, very different podcast altogether. So I'm going to give it a 2.
I think I'm on the 2 side as well. Has anyone here seen The Act of Killing?
No, I've heard a lot.
Yeah, because that's a properly awesome, one of my favourite ever documentaries ever. And then they came out with a sequel, The Look of Silence, a couple of years ago, by the same guy, kind of talking about the same kind of story. And I really want to watch it, but I just haven't got the balls yet to get to see the sequel, which I haven't seen yet. I'm still kind of, don't know if it's scared or reluctant or just like, so I kind of feel like this. I'm not sure when I'd watch it. There has to be a right kind of frame of mind, and I don't know when it would be. I don't know what kind of series of events will have to transpire to make me want to watch it again, but I'm sure I will do. But it's not going to be tomorrow. It's not going to be in the next few months, certainly. Small screen store. We talked about this a bit before.
I'd say it lends itself well to the small screen experience, and I'd say it probably benefits from watching on your own in the dark.
It's not watch with mother.
In one go, in an uninterrupted session.
John? What score? So what score are you giving it?
So I'd give that a 5.
Give it a 5.
Yeah, same here, 5 for all those reasons. I think it's it's quite a personal experience, actually, I think, watching it, and you do kind of absorb it and really want to pay attention to it all. So, yeah, 5.
And Helen?
I mean, I was going to give it a 4 just because I kind of would have also liked to have seen it on the big screen, because there are some fantastic bits of cinematography, particularly the bit where he's under the influence. It reminded me a little bit of The Thin Red Line, with kind of that very dreamy quality to a war film. So I kind of would have quite liked to have seen it on the big screen. So I'm going to give it a 4. But it is made for Netflix, and it is an excellent example of what you can do with Netflix.
I think I'm a 4 as well. Did Kari Fukunaga also do the cinematography behind this as well?
Yeah, he did, yeah. So he did the screenplay, the direction, and the cinematography.
So that's a triple whammy wow there, isn't there, in terms of what you can do if you put your mind to it. I would have liked to have seen this the first time in the cinema, but it still works great on the small screen, so I'll give it a 4. Overall engagement score, so this is like how much were you invested in it? Were you distracted by anything whilst you're watching? Did you feel the need to put it down, pause it, or once you're locked in, that you have to watch it all the way through?
For good reason. It is utterly compelling, completely immersive and engaging, and you would struggle to be distracted by anything.
And you've got 2 kids. You've got 3
I've
kids.
got 3 kids.
Yeah.
And they cry and puke and shit on me. I would still watch this film.
John?
Made you find the time to watch it at all? 5, I think it's 5. I just think the characters and the storyline just draws you in, I think, so much that it's just, you'd sit down and watch it. I might have paused it to get up and go to the loo, I don't know. But other than that, yeah, it's you want to see what happens next. You want to, finish the journey. It's not something you dip in and out of, I think. So, 5.
Yeah, 5, completely. There's just so much going on that, you're completely absorbed in it. There's no concept of time. It's just that you're so involved in what happens. Completely had my attention from start to finish.
Yeah.
And for a long time afterwards as well.
Yeah, I think I'm a 5 as well. There's a proper phones off, airplane mode, and don't even think about it whilst it's on. So that gives us a score of 4.2 overall, which is high, which is good.
Yep, it's a good one.
Do you think that's a fair score?
Yeah, I think the repeat viewing thing I think brings it down for
going against it, but
it's it's not a blockbuster.
No.
So
it stays with you, and I think Helen hit on a really good point there. That it's not just the experience of the film in the moment. Afterwards, for days and weeks afterwards, you will be dwelling on this film in your mind.
I've had flashbacks recently of a couple of scenes where I just kind of think, that's a knife. That's in my head. Guys, if you haven't watched this film, there's a bit with a guy with machetes in people's heads, and it's possibly the worst thing I've seen on television for a long time. But
it's also really beautiful as well. So so take away those 2 thoughts with you.
Try and work those out, yeah.
If you haven't, go and see it now on Netflix. Do it now, immediately, right now.
I agree.
So to sum up, who are you guys and where can we find you?
I'm Ben. I run Top Film Tip, which is a account on Twitter.
John Lunny, I'm on Twitter at John Lunny, shockingly. And you can also find me on Mixcloud and Future Music FM.
All right, guys. Well,
thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
So, well, guys, what did you reckon of Beast of No Nation? Thank you very much to Top Film Tip and Future Music in the shape of Ben and John. Of course, guys, big thanks to GL Productions who edits our podcast for us. Mighty People for the tunes you can hear right now. And don't forget to subscribe to us on iTunes, share it with your friends. And if you want some banter with us, come and find us on Twitter at FlixWatcherPod and visit our website for all the listings and all the news about what we're doing online at flixwatcher.tv.